Incredible Expeditions is a game of steampunk exploration that was presented at Gen Con 2014. That's when I first learned about this game. It seemed interesting, but they didn't have copies available at the time. Now the game has been released. It is available from various sources. I think it is available on Amazon finally, and the designer kindly sent me a copy, so I finally got a chance of playing the game. And today I can share some ideas and impressions with you. Incredible Expeditions is a game of steampunk exploration. It uses cards and it has a deck building element, even though the deck building aspect doesn't feel like it is the main element of the game. I wouldn't call this a deck building game per se. It has part of the game that revolves around that. In this game, players will take on the roles of daring leaders leading expeditions in this steampunk universe, and they are trying to find the mysterious lost city of Atlantis. The game, at least the copy that was sent to me, also has some mini expansions that add more challenges and more theme, but you have a lot of adventures that you can play also just with the components that you find in the base set. What is interesting is that the game can be played in various modes. There is a competitive mode, one of you will win, everybody else will lose and cry, and then there is also a cooperative mode and a solo mode, which pretty much is the cooperative mode, play by yourself. Let me show you how Incredible Expeditions works. In this game, you will play the role of an expedition leader. You will choose your role among a pool of possible available ones. This Scourge of the Side of the China Seas is a possible one. You choose your expedition leader, which comes with a card. There are special abilities described here that your leader will have. The card also indicates the amount of initial tokens that you receive in each of the three main resources in the game, which are money, heroism, and skullduggery. These will be represented by tokens that you will take from an appropriate pool and you place them by your board. And these tokens represent resources that you can save up from turn to turn. There are also many actions and resources in the game that will give you heroism, skullduggery, and money in a temporary form. Then you will use these tracks here to keep track of the amount of points in each category that you have received, but at the end of the encounter in which you use them, those tracks are reset. You place your expedition leader on that board here. Each player has one such board, and here you have 6 slots to add members of the expedition. You will hire possible members of the expedition during the game, and then once you hire somebody, then you simply place your new expedition member in a slot on the board. Expedition, it means you need to go from somewhere to somewhere. These 2 cards represent the initial location of the expedition and the final location respectively. So you place them on the table, and between the 2 of them you will place the world that your characters are exploring. The world will be formed by these locations here. You will use these location cards. In the standard competitive game, you place 4 location cards, just like so, and they represent the locations that the players need to explore to reach the final destination, which is the drowned city of Atlantis. You can experiment with different types of configurations, different amounts of cards for longer games and just for variety. You have a token representing the ship that your expedition leader commands. You place that in the starting location and you're almost good to go. Also, you need to pick up a deck of resource cards. Each player has a starting deck of starting resources, appropriately labeled as such. You shuffle them, and then you get a hand of 5 cards. That's the standard default number of cards that you get in your hand from the resource deck. But there are various factors, such as expedition leader's abilities, that may affect the hand size. And resource cards usually can be played from your hand into a discard pile to generate resources, and then you generate the number of resources printed here, which may vary, or you may use the card for the effect. And some cards only have the resources, some have possible resources or effects, and then you have to choose which part of the card you're actually using. When it is your turn, you can take one or two types of turns. You can announce that you're taking the rest turn or the explore turn. And now we're going to talk about the competitive game. So we'll talk about the competitive rest turn first. Now, during the game, your expedition members may have used their abilities in previous phases, and when you use the abilities of a member of your expedition, you flip it to the exhausted side at the beginning of the rest turn. Then you simply flick back to their fresh side all of your exhausted crew members that can do so. So there may be game effects that prevent them from get rested. Then you can purchase new expedition members, new crew members, and or new resources. This is a deck of resources that can be purchased and added to your initial deck. Now, this deck is face down, this deck is face up on the table, which means you will always see the first crew member that is potentially hireable, that is out for hire. You decide how many cards of each deck you want to potentially purchase, you want to consider for purchase, and you have a total of 6. So, for example, you could choose, I'm gonna select for potential purchase 3 crew members and 3 resource cards. Then you simply look at what you got. Remember, you had a sense of at least part of the crew members that you may hire, at least you know the first one, and you simply look at them, at the cards, and you look at the cost. The acquire cost is simply here. You need to pay all costs. Some crew members can be particularly expensive. For example, here you need to spend resources in all 3 categories to acquire this crew member here. In this case, you only need to spend some money. Here you need money and some skullduggery. It's pretty simple. When you hire a crew member, you add the crew member in an available empty slot on your board. When you purchase a resource card, you place it in your discard pile, deck building style. You place it in your discard pile, and then once your deck of resource cards is exhausted and you're shuffling your discard pile, then the cards that you purchase go back in your draw pile and you can draw them during your turn. And this really is the core of the rest turn. You refresh your crew members and you hire new members and purchase new resources. Now, the other type of turn is the explore turn. You're buying stuff and hiring people because you want to explore, because you want to go on a grand adventure. Now, in the exploration turn, you can move from your current location to a new location, but only if you have defeated an amount of encounters in a location which is equal to or higher than the number printed in the bottom right corner of the location. This is the initial location. It has a 0, which means you can leave it at any time. When you travel to new locations, however, you need to have defeated the indicated amount of encounters, and for each encounter that you defeat in a location, you get a marker to keep track of how many you have and how many you still need before you can move on. There are possible effects that may apply when you enter. When you enter a location, such as here, when entering, then you simply resolve the indicated effect. Other modifiers may be generated by the card, and then you simply have to take care of the encounters that you will face in the location that you just explored. When you are facing an encounter, and you always face an encounter when you enter a new location, you will draw a card from the encounter deck, and you will read the text, as the text may create specific effects may change the situation, may give you modifiers, but at the end of the day, after you have taken into account the text and potentially resolved the effects of the text, you need to be able to produce an amount of the specified resources which equals or exceeds the number printed there. Which is, in order to defeat the magnetic dead zone, I need to be able to produce 12 points of heroism or more. Other things, maybe, for example, this one, in order to defeat the friends in strange places, I need to produce 16 heroism and or 16 skullduggery. As you can see, that's a double. Two possible resources can be spent to defeat this encounter, as indicated by the two symbols in the background, or say the two half symbols. Here we have the Venom Roses, the Clanks. Just to give you an example of the variety. Oh, this is good, because if you manage to defeat this, then you can gain an automaton, which is a possible crew member that automatically gets rested. Storm of the Century, engine failure, unexpected betrayal. A lot of different stuff can happen, and encounters of different types: creatures, supernatural, mechanical, etc, etc, etc. Oh, this is a particularly nasty encounter. Upon facing, you add the sum of all lost crew's skills to the difficulty. What does it mean? It means that during the game you may lose crew members, and the crew members do not go to a discard pile. The ones that you lost go to a lost pile, which means that they can come back later as undead if they're triggered by this card, and there also may be other effects that affect the members of the crew that you left behind, that you lost during the adventure. Speaking about crew members, something I didn't mention before, but it's pretty cool. When you have multiple players in the same area during the rest phase, which is when players can hire crew members, you can hire a crew member and give it to another player. Why would you do so in the competitive game? Because some crew members are not all that good. So actually, you may spend resources to place annoying characters on other players' ships if you are in the same location. For example, if you had the Stowaway Kid on your ship, at the start of each turn, discard a random card from hand or exhaust a crew member other than the Stowaway Kid. There's no advantage in having this guy, and you shouldn't have that guy. You should give it to somebody else. The Saboteur Engineer reduces your hand size by 1. Why would you want that guy on your crew? You don't want the guy on your crew. You want to buy it. It can be pretty expensive, but if you buy it and you place it on somebody else's ship, well, then it's fun. Not for you, not for them, but for you. When you're facing an encounter, if you manage to defeat the encounter by meeting all the requirements of the card and producing the necessary amount of resources, you will gain a defeated encounter marker. But if you do not defeat the encounter, then you have to face a consequence. And in different games, you may choose different consequences to be in play. You simply choose one of these cards at the beginning of the game, or you choose it randomly. And the card that you keep face up on the table indicates what happens when you fail to defeat an encounter, when the encounter defeats you instead of the other way around. This is the basic idea of the game. You keep taking rest turns and adventure turns, facing encounters, moving from location to location until you reach the final location and you defeat the necessary amount of encounters to complete your exploration of the location. And at the point, if you're the first player that completed the exploration of the final destination, you're the winner of the game. The game can also be played in solo mode and cooperative mode. Solo mode pretty much is cooperative mode with a single player. Main differences: if you're playing in the cooperative or solo mode, you use these tokens here, which all say discovery on one side, but they either have keys on the other side or they are blank. It appears that these tokens came out damaged from the box. Actually, I don't dislike them, and they just look old, and like these keys have been through a lot. But I thought I'd mention it also because, well, you're saying it, so I need to acknowledge that. So you have some tokens that have keys and some tokens that are blank. You take a number of each that will be indicated in the instructions for the scenario. You shuffle them and you place them face down on the locations. So as you are traveling from location to location, when you defeat the first encounter in a location, you get to look at the token, and if it's a token that you like, you can keep exploring the location and you will be able to acquire the key once you have completed the necessary amount of encounters in that location. So it takes an encounter to see what a token is, and if you want to acquire a key, you have to complete all of the encounters in the location. In order to win the game in the cooperative solo game, you need to find all of the keys that are on the board and then complete the necessary amount of encounters in the final location. Other differences are, however, that you only have a limited amount of rest turns in the solo and cooperative game. And another important thing is that you have peril cards. When you're moving from a location to a new unexplored location and you're flipping it face up, in the co-op solo version, you draw a card from the peril deck and you simply look at the effects, resolve the effects. Also in this game you have a peril track, and you advance the marker on the peril track by the number printed in the peril card, on the peril card that you just drew. Maybe 3, maybe other numbers. Now, what's interesting is that peril cards will give you negative effects, such as curse or possessions. There is a player that explains to you what the various curses do. And the effect of the peril stays in play until it is removed by meeting the requirements described on the card to remove that peril card. But the peril track does not go back when you remove the card. When you remove the card, you simply remove the negative effect. However, players can spend resources collectively, and if they spend enough resources, then they will indeed be able not just to remove the peril card, but also to move the track back. If the token of the peril track reaches its final location on the peril track, here's the peril track, then you immediately lose the game. If you manage to complete the mission, to find all the keys and reach the final destination and complete all the encounters there before the peril track kills you, then you win the cooperative solo game. In this game, the main thing, the core thing, really is the theme. And I think the theme is implemented quite well. You are in for the adventure, you are in for a ride in this crazy world where there are monsters, saboteurs, mechanical troubles, zombies, gigantic animals, mechanical creatures. It's about what the heck am I going to experience next? What do I have to face? This is the main element of the game. This is a game with a very strong element of narration. This is a game where when you recall a game that you played, probably you will not remember, well, I used the 2 plus 3 and that other game effects, and then I shuffled and then I was able to meet that condition. You will remember the story. You will remember when you were hunted by that monster, when somebody placed a saboteur on your ship and you were finally able to get rid of that, when a curse hit you, but you were able to redirect the curse against the cat, the poor cat. Yeah, there's a card that is the cat, and one of the uses of the cat is to absorb curses that otherwise may go to more useful members of the expedition. It will be about the doctor saving that person. It will be about the hunter throwing himself against the monster and sacrificing himself. That's one of the abilities of the hunter character. You can win an encounter against an animal, but you have to sacrifice the hunter, which makes mechanical sense, but also results in a fun episode to remember. So it is about the story. This is why the game to me works very well as a solo, as a solo game. I also think it works very well as a cooperative game. If you're playing it competitively to win, then you may have a problem because you may realize that so much really depends on the luck of the draw. The encounters that you face, some are simply incredibly tough. I can't say impossible because I can see circumstances under which some of those encounters that seemed impossible to me would be reasonable, but some are just incredibly tough, and they require specific expertise, specific things when you are facing that encounter. So unless you're incredibly powerful and you spent a lot of time preparing for a specific encounter and you have the right combination of effects ready, that encounter is simply just going to slam you and to give you disadvantages, which again will put you behind the other players and so on and so forth. The luck coming from the adventures and from the locations is large, is vast, which is why the game may be frustrating if you're just playing it to win. So you need to kind of let go a little bit. If you are playing this game, you need to enjoy the story, and somebody else will win maybe, but as the person wins, you were part of a story, of a narrative that was fun to build together. I think you have to even if you're playing competitively, to see it almost as a cooperative experience in which everybody's telling a story and interacting to tell a larger story, even if at the end only one player wins. And sure, there are things that you can do to mitigate the luck. You can pile up resources and things like that, but ultimately you have that factor there, which may be pretty important, pretty massive in the overall architecture of the game. Another element is that the pace of the game can be extremely discontinuous, and you can have kind of like that that slow pace that you have sometimes when you're playing deck building games such as Dominion. But here, what I'm referring to is not so much about the deck building element, it's about games where you chain off effects one from the other. You create an effect, it gives you an extra effect, and then you play a card that refreshes that card, which allows you to create an effect, which allows you to get an advantage, which gives you a bonus, which you spend to get something else, etc., etc., etc. It's very fun to perform that when you manage to create these chains or nets of effects. It's not so fun if you have to sit through several other players doing that before it is your turn, and maybe that turn you don't get to do that. That turn you're just doing something boring and menial, you're done in a minute, which is okay. From time to time you will have turns like that, but then again you have to sit through a lot of these people doing other things. Sure, there is a certain level of interaction. What other players do may affect you in the competitive game, but it is pretty much about, I'm going to send you a curse, I'm going to send you a negative effect, I'm going to get an annoying member of my crew on your crew, I'm going to hire somebody that you don't want. It is about determining an effect that affects other players negatively. It's not so much like an intense active interaction like you would have, I don't know, when you're resolving combat in a war game and both players, including the non-active player, still making decisions. So you may have that problem with the pace of the game, which may be a factor, especially if you're teaching the game to new players. Then the other players will spend a lot of time reading the effects, learning about the characters and what the characters can do, which is absolutely normal, but it will slow down the game. I would not recommend teaching the game to more than one player at a time. If you know how to play the game and there is another player, then introduce that player in a two-player game, then maybe you repeat that with another player. And when you're playing your first four-player game, then it will be with players that know how to play that. And you will have a little bit of this pace, I don't say problem, but weakness, especially early on. I think it's unavoidable. Another fact is that the pace of the game is kind of discontinuous, because you may have a very exciting turn in which you are in for an incredible adventure, you face a bunch of encounters, your crew is exhausted, but yet they push it through and fantastic things happens, and then you have a couple of turns in which you simply recover from that. Your crew needs to be refreshed. You need to spend resources to get rid of negative effects. You're purchasing new cards. You need to replace a crew member. So there will be a sort of like this continuous pace in which you will have a couple of turns in which you're just building up to an adventure. Then you're facing the adventure, and maybe you're incredibly unlucky that adventure destroys you, and then you have to go back to recover from the effects of that adventure. I would say that some moments in which the adventure is not so exciting are to be expected. They definitely are a possibility, and if you're playing a game with multiple players, that may be a negative. If you're playing the solo game, if you're playing the cooperative game, that is not as much of a problem because you're still debating strategy with the other players in a cooperative game, and you're always the active player if it is a solitaire game. So I would say that if you're playing the competitive game, there is that element that may become a negative factor, which is a twofold element. One is luck is a factor, and because luck may throw in unpredicted and unpredictable events into the story that may destroy your best laid plans and force you to then spend a couple of turns when you're not doing much but simply preparing yourself for the next fun adventure, which in turn, if multiple players are doing this, may make the pace of the game not as excited as it could be. But I've elaborated on this maybe a little too much because when you move back from the mechanical aspect of things and you go back again to the experience, this is a fun game. Ultimately, it is fun to live this adventure almost as an RPG game with cards and physical components, as an enhanced and structured RPG game. The point is the story. If you like this kind of universe, if you like this sort of unpredictable, crazy story, then I don't think you would mind so much about the mechanical aspects that may otherwise bother you. Don't think about this in terms of a Euro game. This is not a tight, polished, elegant design. It is meant to represent a messy, crazy world where anything and everything can happen. In that, the game is really successful. I would say this is a fun game for those of us who like thematically rich games, games with a strong narrative. It can be maybe not the best game for those of us that are looking for mechanical elegance and economy.